Welcome to the Alternative Leader podcast. My name is Mary Williams and I'm the Mind Architect. I'm also founder of the Alternative Leader Academy and author of It Begins With You. This podcast is dedicated to inspiring the leaders of today to lead with intention, both in their personal and their professional lives. My guests from across the world share their challenges, their knowledge and their experiences so that we can learn from these powerful insights to help us lead with strength, determination and compassion. Welcome to the Alternative Leader podcast. My name is Mary Williams and I'm the Mind Architect. Today's guest is Nola Simon. Nola runs a podcast called the Janice Oasis Podcast, and Nola is committed to helping companies and individuals find a hybrid remote working system that works for them. Unusually, Nola didn't learn any of this through the pandemic, but around 10 years ago, when she found herself in a situation where she needed hybrid remote working. Nola's experience is second to none, and here she talks about how she experienced it and how it worked within her company and her journey. Nola also talks about leadership and how is it possible to be a leader when you have no team. So thank you, Nola, for joining us. So, Nola, you were just talking to me about quite an interesting story, which is that your reflections around leadership and what's led you to start your business now actually came from you being turned down for a leadership role. And so we were talking about the sort of catalyst of leadership. So can you explain sort of what happened and then obviously how that's led on?
Yeah, of course. So this was actually 2010. The company that I was working for had a leadership program that they were trying to generate interest in. And they had really just launched it. And the idea was to groom internal people to eventually take management roles within the call center. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that that was a great way for me to actually advance my career. And I was really excited about it. And I applied for it. And the problem with it was I lived actually quite far north. So I lived 60 kilometers north of our main city. And at the time, my kids were very little. So one of the things I had told them is like, if I do this, I'm going to actually need support to be able to manage my other workload.
Right.
And that wasn't going to fit. They didn't have that extra level of support to be able to offer me both the leadership program and the extra workload support. So I was turned down for the program. And so that was very disappointing to me because like it was an avenue. Like I had worked for the company almost 7 years at that point. Wow. And it was, I was really ready to pivot personally and be able to demonstrate that level of expertise. I was already treated as an expert in a lot of areas in that company. And it's just like, well, where do you go from there? And what I was finding as well, too, is if I wanted to do extra work, which I felt that in order to advance a career and actually get the attention I needed outside of that leadership opportunity, I was going to have to be able to do extra work on the side. And the choices that I had at that time were go into the office and just not see my kids that day. And that was not a choice I was comfortable with, right? So I actually changed teams so I could get access to VPN. And once I hit that team, I pushed and pushed and pushed to be part of a pilot for work from home. And so being turned down for the leadership opportunity actually meant that I started on the road to actually pioneer the work from home, the hybrid remote, and become an expert, which is really what I've leveraged to be able to start my business in consulting, helping companies do hybrid remote work better, right? Okay. It's not an avenue I would have expected. Like 10 years ago, I was really just trying to figure out my way in the world. And now it's just like I'm launching this consulting business based on that experience, because the knowledge that I've built up over the 10 years has really positioned me to be an expert to be able to help companies as they come out of the pandemic. I mean, nobody predicted the pandemic really. So, or maybe they did, but they didn't share.
I think they did, but we all ignored them.
Yeah, it could be. Exactly. That's right. So yeah, it's that old chestnut of, no is a redirection. Right. So I'm actually really grateful to the lady who actually told me that I was no, because she actually also wrote me a recommendation this week And I actually put it in my newsletter, basically saying, thank you for turning me down, because this is what I've been able to do instead.
I think that's fantastic. And it's often, isn't it, actually the best ideas, best businesses come from catalysts like that. Because like you say, if you had been accepted, actually, maybe you'd have just traveled up and you'd now be sitting in management in that company, which would be, very nice, but very, very different to the journey that you've come on. And also it did put you kind of 10 years ahead of the remote working curve. It's interesting, isn't it? Because
I know,
I think a lot of people do think, oh, we've only just started remote working, but actually there were people remote working. And I remember there was the big thing about remote schooling. Do you remember when we went into the pandemic? And actually, people in Australia were saying, well, this is what we've always done. So it is now utilizing that information for people who have the long-term tried and tested rules of how this works, like you've tried and tested it for 10 years to now step forward and say, okay, actually, if you want to keep this long term, like you were saying about employers, not all employers do want to all rush back to the office or bring people back to the office. Because I think one of the things that we have seen is how much happier some people are, actually being able to work at home or do a hybrid or whatever. So it's fantastic. So I loved it when I sort of said to you, kind of what's your kind of topic. You said, how do I lead when I've never been in charge of a team? And I think that's actually a really powerful statement, because obviously it does tap into who are you, and then who are you leading and how are you leading, and all of that sort of stuff. So and putting children first. Again, I think the pandemic has allowed parents, both male and female, to say, I'd like to see my children. So it's very powerful.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And it's highlighted for a lot of people that they weren't seeing them enough, and they didn't actually even realize, because it was just the way it was. Right. And so when the pandemic actually first started, because I had that experience, like, I remember there was one day we, well before the pandemic started, it was a snow day and my kids were home and I was working from home. And back then we also had this edict that basically if there was any background noise, or, you had a kid crying or a dog barking, or it was going to be a problem. And if a customer complained, you could lose your work from home. So I remember this day very vividly. I was horrible at my job, and I was a horrible parent, because my kids were like, they were having a bad day. Right. And it was just like, oh my God, you need to stop making noise, because I'm going to lose this flexibility. And it was just like the worst feeling in the world, because it's like, how do you make that work? I remember bundling them up into their snowsuits and putting them out on the back deck just to play around in the snow, so that I could make a call without risking somebody crying.
It's
and
hilarious.
So when the pandemic started, I started it was an internal social group. It's an Office 365 tool called Yammer. And I created like a group for parents, really just to talk about the experience that they were having, because I knew just from that one day pre-pandemic that it was going to be awful. I mean, nobody knew the pandemic was going to last as long as it was. I mean, I didn't have that foresight. But even if it lasted like a couple of weeks, a month, like I knew what that one day had been like. And so eventually that actually got turned into an employee resource group that was designed for families to support caregivers of all sorts, not just parents or mothers or whatever. And I think that that's a really important thing for companies to be able to look at, is how can you leverage leadership? Because parenting and caregiving is an extreme form of leadership, right? And I think that it's really been highlighted, honestly, throughout the pandemic, because people are trying to figure out how to make things work at that level of creativity that a caregiver has to have to be able to do your job and to make sure that everybody's supported. That's a huge skill.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
It is. Yeah.
And I think that that's something that's good, that's been coming out of the pandemic, because companies are leveraging that creativity in a lot of ways.
I think that's a really interesting point. I remember years and years and years ago reading a book. I think it might be a US author actually, and it's called something like Everything I Learned About Being a Manager I Learned from My Kids. And it was a guy he'd been in really senior roles, and then he had to take a year off to look after his kids. And he said when he came back, he just found it all so much easier because he was just applying the same rules that he kind of applied to his toddlers fighting to kind of disagreements in the boardroom and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, is that it's been this, and I always hated it and have always, I fought against it a lot through my work, and what I've written about is this whole, you must leave your stuff at the door when you go into the office. And it's like rubbish. You're a human being. If you've had an argument or a difficult morning, of course it's going to affect you. And in some respects, it's interesting. I'm reflecting on it now, that it led to the way that I work, which is, I can come and help you as a CEO with your team, but I can also help you with the argument you had with your 14-year-old, or the conversation, that you had with your partner last night, because ultimately all of those things are you, and will then affect how you are in the office, and you then affect everybody else, and this knock-on effect. We cannot pretend any longer that our whole life doesn't affect our whole life. It's just
exactly.
The work-life balance is, we talk about it flippantly, but in some respects it's not true, because there is no work life, there's just life. And so you're reminding me of, I saw a cartoon, I think it was yesterday, and it said something like preparations before Zoom, and it had a man sitting down at his Zoom computer, and then it had a cat like duct taped to the wall. And it just made me laugh, because I just thought you would never have had that cartoon pre-pandemic. You just
I know. Well, and when it did happen pre-pandemic, it was like the BBC guy, with the toddler who marched into the office, and the whole world was like, "Oh my God, he's so brave." And I remember thinking at that point, it's like, it's only because he's a man, and everybody kind of thinks he's cute. But if that had happened to a woman, she would have been told that she was unprofessional for her toddler marching into that office.
Absolutely.
Right? And
now
that's the thing what the pandemic has actually done is given us this gift, that the barrier between your work persona and your home persona, that's extremely thin. And it's normalized it, right? Like it would no longer be acceptable for somebody to really think that that's awful, right? It's just that's a gift, right? Because I remember what it was like before.
And I think there's for me, it's interesting you said the barrier between it is thin. For me, it's about professionalism now. It's about I remember being on a Zoom call with, I think it was possibly, we were on a panel, and the woman obviously lived in quite a small flat, and her partner just came out of the shower with a towel wrapped around his waist. He just like walked across the back of the room, just didn't even think about it. And we all kind of smiled, because she didn't see it, because of course it was behind her, and we were all just laughing. We had to say, "Oh, this has just happened," and we all laughed. And you think, actually, in the old days, we'd have gone, "Oh my God, she probably would have lost her job." But now we were all able to go, "Okay, learning curve." And now I think it is about that we're picking up those things and going, "Okay, that's not professional," but actually hearing some kids or hearing something in the room is not. And I remember being on the phone to, I think it was a call center. And I think the man I was talking to, I'm trying to remember, because we did have a conversation, I think he was in Bangladesh, and it was beautiful because you could hear his country's noises, and I could hear like cicadas, and I could hear all these different sounds to what and it really took me there. And I was thinking, wow, I wonder what's going on for you. And I said to him, "Is it hot?" And he's like, "Oh my God, yeah, it's so hot." And we were laughing because it was freezing here. And we actually had this really human conversation, just because I could hear these different noises. And how human it was that we would, I was saying, "Oh, it's like 6 degrees here." And he was like, "I don't know what that is."
Right.
I have no frame of reference for that. And so I think for me, it's moved to professionalism rather than kind of, let's ignore the fact I have a family, or it's about what is professional now, and how do we judge what that is. That's kind of where I'm on it.
No, exactly. I agree. There was one time, it's funny you talk about that, but there was one time my daughter was on Zoom school, and she had to come down and ask me a question. I had just gotten out of the shower, and she walks into the bathroom with her computer, and I'm like, "You better tell me that camera is not on." Fortunately, I've trained them well enough over the years that the camera was off, but I was just like, "Oh my God." I don't think
about it. And I do remember actually I think it was the second night of lockdown, and my daughter was showing me, it was a video from her, one of her deputy principals, so really quite high up in the school, and he was clearly sitting in bed. And so you could see he was kind of propped up on pillows. He'd got a hoodie on. There was like a night light here. And I did just say to her, oh, that's really not good, actually, because he's a teacher and you're a kid and he shouldn't be in bed doing this. But it was that whole kind of thing of we're all just trying to find our feet here. And then he never did again. You know, he was always upright,
Right.
you know, but it was just that moment of obviously, you know, somebody had obviously gone, you can't do that. And I loved those moments of kind of humanity where, you know, he was probably sitting in bed at 11:30 at night, you know, trying to manage his own family schooling, his own, and just going, oh my God, I've got to do this video for, you know, my students, and just didn't think it through. And so what is it? Because obviously we've now had 2 years of this. What is it that you think you can bring to a company that's more than kind of the stumblings and the learnings that they've learned over the last couple of years? What is it?
So honestly, I'd like to challenge their thinking, right? So I have been through all of this because initially we started, I broke my foot 6 weeks into the pilot of work from home. So I ended up being the only person in the whole company who's working from home 5 days a week without really any support. And like the technology really just wasn't good at that point, right? So then eventually the pilot was pulled. We lost work from home. It was back to work 5 days a week. And then gradually we built it up again once it started again, right? When I left, I was up to 1 day a week, but I had actually worked myself into the point of burnout so badly. I actually ended up getting pneumonia.
Right.
My workload was so intense. I was getting up at like 3:00 in the morning and not finishing work until 10:00 at night. Thank goodness the computer systems were old and they actually shut down at 10. That was the only reason I stopped working. That whole classic thing about remote work actually causing overwork, you know, I've lived through that, right? But one day, I was only working 1 day a week in the city. I was feeling better and traffic was really, really slow. And so I started not feeling great halfway down, and I opened my window, started feeling better, and then I closed the window. When I closed the window, it caused my lung to collapse. I had pneumonia, but I didn't realize. And so I hit a concrete hauler, a double concrete hauler. It was fully loaded, and shut down the DVP. So, I mean, honestly, because I passed out, I wasn't seriously injured. I had bruising on my chest and whatnot. Destroyed my car, but honestly, I'm very, very lucky to have walked away. But that's where I left that division and went to 100% remote. I actually got the only job in the whole company that was 100% remote because I didn't want to have to commute anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And if I did actually, it was a sales job. So I did have to go out and see clients, but it was around here, right? Like I didn't have to go on a major freeway. So I've seen all of the different versions of what that looks like. And I also used to have to travel for work too. I used to have to fly into the US and actually support sales teams directly in the areas that I supported, right? So I've worked on the road as well too. So I have an advantage where I've seen all of these different ways of working, whereas especially executive teams, although they may have been on the road, they don't know what it's like to actually do it from home.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they may have done it here and there, but they're insulated by virtue of their position, right? Because they have executive assistants, right? They have people who pave their way and they can delegate. So somebody who's like in a call center, for example, you don't have that authority to really be able to delegate. So I have an insight because I've been in operations for 20 odd years. I have an insight into what your employees are really feeling. Right. And again, that's different from your traditional consulting firm, because traditional consulting firms, honestly, they've worked in person too, right? Like they come into the client's office and a lot of their experience really has been, they're not working in their own office, but they are working in the client office. They haven't worked from home either. Right. So I bring a perspective that a lot of people don't necessarily have outside of the experience of having worked in the pandemic. And I've actually had long-term remote workers actually come to me and thank me for giving a voice for those people who've done it for years and years and years, because it's actually adding value to their experience too. And it's opening up a channel for them to talk about their experiences too. Right?
It's interesting. It was it's a sort of, you know, you've done the 360, haven't you? Really, you've kind of sat in all parts of the circle. It's reminded me it was just something you were saying there about just having that experience. I was talking to somebody I met recently, and she was saying how she works in finance, and how they had, they'd all obviously gone home, and now they're all coming back into the office, but some people not every day. And she said, actually, that kind of vibe of being in the office and there being the people that you want to talk to is not, is not there, because people are coming back in on different days. And so she said, actually, then it's kind of this sort of weird no man's land between, well, there were kind of people here, but maybe my friend isn't here, and it's all a bit empty. And, she was saying it's a really weird adjustment back in. And I think we do need people to help us get those adjustments right. And also actually just listen to people, because, I've definitely got clients who are saying, I have recognized I am, so much more productive when I'm just, sitting at home. I can get on with my work. I'm not interrupted. This is my personality type. So, and I'm a very distractible person. And as you know, I built this cabin to remove me from distractions. And then you've got other people who are saying, but actually I'm really extrovert and I really like being around people, and that makes me more productive. So I want to go back into the office. And then you've got, some people are saying, well, I quite like to do a bit of both. And actually, I think, I feel, and we talked about this, I know, when I came on your podcast, this whole thing of expecting leaders to know and do everything, manage the trauma, manage the remote, manage this, manage that, we're just saying, well, you're the leader, you're going to have to sort that out, without actually saying, well, hang on, maybe that's not your specialism and you need to call someone in. So
right. And you're working within a system, right? So like, as an owner, as a founder, as a CEO, or whatever executive level you happen to be, you're within that system. It's really hard to see a system that you're a part of, and the managers are part of that system. That's where an outside perspective can be really helpful, because you can see how basically the ecosystem works without actually being a part of that system, right? I'm sure you've seen that too.
Yes.
Consulting as well too, right? Like, people can't see the forest for the trees, but that's where you can really give advice to say, you're putting too much pressure on your managers. You're not supporting them. You're not giving them the training they need. You actually need to, like you've mentioned before, like your ideal would be to actually have companies hire a therapist coach as a standalone position to be able to handle the whole company. Right. So that you're actually taking away some of that emotional labor that's ended up on the management team, and that they're not really trained to deal with. Right. So I think there's a real opportunity to build with intention and to be able to support the flexibility and the autonomy. But I think the gift is, how can we personalize the experience? Right. So that it's going to play to people's strengths and help them thrive. And the goal really would be, how do you build like a hybrid system, a remote system? How do you embed that into your work so that the business is going to thrive, but your people are going to thrive? And it's going to be a real part of the retention of those people, and attraction of new people, because the Great Resignation, I mean, it definitely seems to be a thing. I mean, if you put air quotes around it or not, right? People have had a lot of time to consider what they want out of life. And is the work purposeful? Why do they show up in like to work at all? Right. And then if you are actually putting the challenge of actually showing up to an office, well, what's the purpose of the office? What's the intention? Right. I actually found that I didn't like remote work. And that was actually interesting to me, because I anticipated that I would, right? Because I hated the commute so much. But it was part and parcel of, I wanted to do volunteer work. I found a lot of opportunity working with like the women's leadership employee resource group. Like, I founded the resource group for the family. A lot of times there were people that I wanted to network who were actually based in the office. Well, when I went 100% remote, because the sales role was not designed to work with head office in any way, I didn't even have access to the building. The policy had not been designed to encourage anybody who's remote to engage in person.
That's interesting.
Right. I had to run through hoops to be able to get access. And I actually stepped on toes, because my boss and his boss didn't really appreciate the fact that they couldn't give me what I was asking for. And I really actually had to negotiate that on my own, through my own network. right? They weren't fond of me
No.
because I highlighted a gap in their authority.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But again, nobody had ever done it. Like, it's very rare that people who work in head office, especially for like a long period of time, like I did, I worked for the company in total for 17 and a half years. It's very rare that somebody who's that head office based switches to a remote role. Right. Or at least for that company, it was rare.
Yeah.
And that's where I talk a lot about, like, are you building paths? Like, even if you choose a version of hybrid or remote or whatever, are you building paths so that people can get from one area to another? Right. So, like, just because you start in an office centric role, if life changes, can you get to a hybrid version? Can you get to remote that's going to support what's happening in that person's life? Or are you really just directing that person to the exit?
Yeah. And I think the whole thing around the Great Resignation is really interesting, because I saw this happening kind of before the phrase came, and it was only literally a few weeks ago someone said, oh yes, they're calling this the Great Resignation. And I thought, okay, I saw this starting up in a year ago, is that basically the people that were being forced back into the office were already starting to say, no, I'm not doing it, I don't like it. And people who had been stuck in the office were saying, well, actually, I've noticed that my friends aren't doing that hideous commute, and I'm not doing it anymore. And I said, people are immediately starting to shift, and not only shift and then, they get into the new job, but shift and then shift again and shift again and shift again as they search for the thing that works really well for them. And I think I'm really surprised. I mean, definitely, obviously, there are some companies who can't have people remote, they need them hands-on, and I get that. But I think for the people that don't, those companies are missing a trick, because if people are more productive and more happy, you're not going to pay, you're not going to have them off sick so much. You're actually often they will, as you did, they will work longer hours because they're loving what they're doing. They're more engaged. They will come up with more opportunities. I mean, there's this exponential growth from actually helping people do what they want. And I know, my daughter doesn't drive, and she has to cross town to get to her work. And straight away, she's, a bit of an introvert. And, immediately she said to me, oh gosh, I get so much more done at home because I'm not commuting. So I'm not so tired. I'm up fresh as a daisy kind of first thing in the morning. And actually, so she manages some volunteers, and actually they're not all interrupting me. And so actually, if you look at that, even if you look at it purely on a financial basis, the work that she is doing is worth so much more. And I think that's where we haven't, kind of company owners haven't quite adjusted to the fact of, just because I can't see you doesn't mean you're actually now not doing kind of a job and a half in the same time that you were doing, your job before. In fact, I read a really interesting statistic, I think 3 or 4 days ago, and it said, when you're in an office, you are interrupted every 11 minutes. And it was saying by something, phone call, email, etc., from your task. And it was saying, when you look at the amount of time it takes to, effectively get your brain back into the thing that you were doing, you're losing a third of every day just reorientating your brain back into what it was doing. Whereas I know, I can come and sit in this cabin. No one interrupts me. I choose not to check my email all the time. And actually, I can just get my head down and work solidly. I get so much more done. And even actually, I was talking to a client just a couple of days ago, and he was saying he's very pro kind of having, almost instead of having these huge open plan offices, actually having, hundreds of sort of mini offices that you then come out of and into a communal area if you feel that you want some human contact. But actually you have your own almost little booth and space that you decorate how you want, and it's quiet and it's calm. And he was saying how he got almost nothing done in an open plan office. And again, he thought there should be choice. Do you want to go in a booth? Do you want not to? And it's that, to me, it's about saying, you are a human being. How do you function best? What works for you? I'm very distractible. I need to be kind of enclosed in a little space. If you're somebody who really needs that open space, then you can kind of go and sit in one of those desks over there.
But that's a mindset shift.
And it's fascinating. It is a mindset shift. And but I'm actually in some respects quite shocked that, I mean, it was something I was sort of promoting anyway. Then we've had the pandemic, but we still seem to be struggling to move to this.
But and that's the thing. A lot of it is, what does the task involve? Like, what does your job involve? What tasks are involved in that job? But also, what does the management think that your job should be? And so there's a disconnect. There was one time, and again, this was way pre-pandemic, but I went into the office and I was engaged in a project, and I needed I wanted like personal time. So I took time off the phones. And again, the majority of my job was based on the phones. I was supposed to be logged in. I was tracked. But because of this project, I needed to have like that downtime. And so I actually booked a conference room, logged out, went to work. And then the manager, she wasn't even my manager. It was like a jointly managed team. There were 3 managers in total. I had a dedicated one, but the others were responsible as well too. She hunted me down and like literally hunted me down and made me go back to the desk in the open office, because the perception was that I was not part of the team. I was not being a team player because I had chosen to sit apart from the team.
Wow, that's incredible, isn't
And
it?
that's where I'm saying, like, this is a mindset shift in terms of how management views their job. Because I think like that that person, she, you know, she would need extra training. That how does that actually work? How does that really facilitate the task? Because I can tell you for the whole rest of the day, I was not performing well. I was so annoyed, right?
No. And actually, what a lovely model you gave to the others in the team was, if you need to get something done, take your space.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's such a shame, isn't it? Really is. But
well, I mean, there was a reason that I left. I mean, it wasn't just commute. It wasn't just hitting a concrete truck, right? So it was just, you know, I need to be able to function. And you get to a point where it's like, if you feel that you're not progressing and you're not getting what you need out of the work and the environment, you need to take an action. And so my action was to leave and go 100% remote. And I learned from that action that I actually don't like 100% remote. I like the autonomy. I like the autonomy of being able to choose when I can go to the office because there's something that I want to achieve. Right? Because I value in person. And that's, I think, a misconception that a lot of people have is like, if you choose some version of hybrid or remote, that you never see your team. Well, that's not true. It's just your default is you work from home or you work from some other area. There are companies that are actually creating hubs, which I find kind of interesting, where they're supporting like co-working spaces and allowing people to get out of their homes, but still have some sort of office environment too, right? Having the autonomy and the flexibility to choose what's going to support you on that particular day. I mean, that's the ultimate.
I think
right?
it's, I think
that's exciting.
Beautiful, isn't it? Really, actually, today, I mean, there are days, you know, even with my cabin, I think I'd just like to be away from my house and working somewhere completely different. And I'm not a good person who works in coffee shops. I'm so distractible.
I wouldn't want that either. But my husband is a contractor, right? So he builds, like he does home renovations, kitchens, basements, all that stuff. But you know, sometimes he's loud, and he works in my garage, and my office backs onto the garage. So if he's choosing a day where he's going to be, you know, sawing or drilling or whatever he's doing out there, and I have to record something, well, that's just not going to work for me. But what environment do I have? Right. So a lot of times that actually became a problem, because it's like he needs to be able to do his stuff, because literally he can only work from home when he's actually doing projects that are part of a client job. Right. So he can usually only work from home when he's working for me for free.
It's that funny thing, isn't it? It's that whole negotiation of time. I know I have quite a few clients who say, you know, do you have an appointment between here and here because the children are out? Or, you know, they were having to negotiate kind of, you know, mental space to have an appointment with me through the pandemic, because everybody was home and in the house. And I think that's fantastic. But we must sort of come to an end. But you have developed a podcast, haven't you? Now, we were just talking about the pronunciation of this, because it can be either or either. So you pronounce it I'm going to say the Janice Oasis podcast, and I was saying, is it the Janus? And but for you, it's the Janice Oasis podcast. And
it's one of those things I never thought to check what the pronunciation would be, because it's based on the Roman god that is got 2 heads. And the idea is like there's a head looking towards the past and a head looking towards the future. Lovely. And that captures sort of the mission of what I'm trying to do with the podcast, which is how do we bring the best of the past into the future to create a better future of work, right? And I learned that when I was trying to teach Alexa a skill, I just want Alexa to say, play the Janice Oasis podcast, right? And then it starts playing. Well, Alexa pronounces it Janus. I'm like, oh, well, that would have been thoughtful for me to double check, but yeah.
I think it's your podcast and you can pronounce it how you wish. But
Yes.
anyway, and I presume it's on all of the normal podcast channels.
It is. Yeah,
Brilliant.
Exactly.
Okay.
You can Google it and find it. So
great. And I'm going to ask you the 3 questions I ask all guests. So the first one is, when you look back sort of through those challenges, has there been a book, a film, or a piece of music that has really helped you through?
Well, I mean, honestly, when my job was restructured in December of 2020, I really embraced the voice version of the Pitch Perfect soundtrack, Freedom 90. I'm a George Michael fan. And so if you know Freedom 90, you're going to miss me by my hair. You're going to miss me everywhere. So my hair is white. And the whole Cup song, it's a mashup with the Cup song from Pitch Perfect, which is You're Going to Miss Me When I'm Gone. Yeah. And so I would just put this on and dance around in my living room and just basically have fun. And it was just like, you're going to miss me. It made me feel better.
That's brilliant. I love that. I think music is just so emotive. Yeah. Lovely. Okay. If there was a tip that listeners could do or think, or just something to take away today, what would it be?
That you have a voice. So even if you think that you're not important in your organization and that you don't have influence, you definitely have influence. You know what works for you personally. You know what works for your team, for your job. The thing that you have to do is have courage to speak your truth. And it has influence. And there's never actually been a better time to speak up and ask for what it is you want.
Oh, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. That's lovely. And my third one is, if you were standing in front of the world leaders today, what would you say to them?
That you really need to listen to the younger people and stop thinking that you know everything because of what your experience has been, and embrace flexibility. That's
lovely. I love that. Look, Nola, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your experience. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. And, I know you obviously a little bit through our sort of business contact, and I really would recommend that people get in touch with you because you really do know your stuff.
Thank you.
So how do they find you if they want to get in contact with you?
So LinkedIn is really my happy place. So I'm on LinkedIn as Nola Simon. But also Twitter. So it's at Nola Simon TJO, which is the Janice Oasis short form. Okay. My website is www.nolasimon.com. So lovely. Pretty much if you know my name, you can find me.
We'll find you. Okay,
you lovely. Can Google me. The only other person you find on Google really is an artist in New Orleans. So he's a good guy. His name is Simon, but he's a lot of fun. We're friends on Instagram.
I had a thought one day of linking to all of the other people called Mary throughout the world. And then I realized there were quite a few of them. So I decided
quite a few, especially if you actually change it with a Y.
Absolutely. Right. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Williams, as you know, and thank you so much for listening to the Alternative Leader podcast. I search for guests to bring you lessons and learnings that can help move you forward in your life, help you achieve the success that you want to, in whatever way that shows up for you, to help you lead powerfully, whether that's in your own life, as your parenting, your personal, or your professional, and make you the best that you can be. If you've enjoyed the show, please rate and review it, and please share it with as many people as you think also want to move forward and gain success in their lives. If you want to find out more about me, go over to my website, which is www.mary-williams.com. That's www.mary, which is MARI-williams.com, and you'll find links to all of my social media profiles there. There's also a Facebook community that you can join, and again, all the links will be on the website too. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day, and thank you so much for listening.